live in here.
Yeah.
All right, producer. All right, producer. I think we're good.
Cool. So how does this work? It basically streams parallel on Twitter.
Yeah. Hold on one sec.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah, we've set this up a couple different ways. So we decided like there's pros and cons, but we decided like maybe 7, 8, 9 months ago, because we've probably done like maybe 300 like either Twitter Spaces or these. We decided like the visual stuff's just way more engaging, rather than just like an audio Twitter Space. There are some caveats to that though. Like the thing that sucks is, there is a way to like attach the participants like Twitter accounts. Like when it said like go live to your audience, like you could, if you wanted to do that when we're live, you could literally attach a Twitter account and go live if you want to. Which I'm happy to, if you want to do that, you can certainly do that. But so it kind of like semi-silos us into Genfinity's Twitter to an extent, which kind of sucks. We RTMP directly into Twitter because there is a way to just like click a button and go live when we're live on Twitter. But what ends up happening is like, I think Twitter has like like rated limits on the content that you can kind of direct feed into Twitter. So like we would do a podcast and then after the fact, it would hide the podcast and just show the broadcast link. So you'd have to like click on it. So the reason we RTMP is now if you scroll down through Genfinity's feed, you just see all the podcasts. But the only caveat to that is like, I have to set them up in advance, RTMP in, and then like manually end it or have it just cut at the end. And at least the videos stay up. So
it's interesting.
Yeah. And we
put
like
work. People don't realize how much work goes into this stuff.
No. And like so I started putting like, I put ad spend in like Twitter ad spend, not like external bots, like, a lot of people like to do, but like I'll put like Twitter ad spend on like, especially every video interview that I do. What ends up happening, and I guess this is just more knowledge for you if you ever do them, you do get a ton more organic engagement even after the fact. So like if I set up ad spend for a podcast, like a video space, I normally will set it within a window. But what's always interesting to watch is like, okay, I do ad spend. We get, whatever, 50, 60, 70,000 views on something. And then the ad spend ends. But I always like to check the next day because like normally you'll get 7, 8, 9,000 like organic views on the back end of it, even without ad spend, just because you did ad spend in the first place. So like, because it's I guess it sends you up higher on like the Algorand or the algorithm for spaces. So I've been doing these forever, dude. I don't know. It's
I've been in crypto since 2021, and it feels like a complete eternity. Like I don't really remember life before crypto.
Well, I associate it with almost like dog years. Like a year in crypto is like 6 to 7 years in mental aging.
I've become completely numb to everything.
I'm in the same boat, dude. I think we probably have about a minute. Let me check.
Okay.
Yeah, we got about a minute.
Cool.
Oh my. It's crazy. Like I reached out. I don't know. We can talk offline on some stuff too. I'm sure you and I have interesting viewpoints on stuff. I'm fine with getting into whatever on here though too. I mean, really, the goal of these are to kind of just shine a light on what's going on within the Algorand ecosystem and you guys, and
No, I mean the only thing I can't do is just badmouth my company. But apart from that,
yeah, for sure,
free game.
All right, let me make sure. You'll hear me do my intro spiel, and then we'll kick off here. I got like 35 seconds.
Yeah, sure.
I forgot to get an extra cup of coffee.
Yeah, it's like This is the one nice thing about working from home now. It's like I used to have to get up at like 5 o'clock in the morning every day. And now I could just like sleep in, roll out of bed, be on my first meeting. It's fantastic.
Yeah, as long as you get your stuff done. All right, we got 5 seconds and I'll kick us off here. What is up, everybody? Solomon here. Super excited to be with Genfinity, interviewing a multitude of builders across Web3. We're going to be diving deep into the weeds within the Algorand ecosystem here today. Super excited to have Joseph with me from Pera ALGO Wallet. Always like to start these with a little bit of an intro. So, Joseph, if you could give us an intro of yourself and what you do within Pera, that'd be fantastic.
Sounds good. Thank you for having us. So my name is Joseph Calla. I'm currently the head of product and marketing at Pera Wallet. I also work for the Algorand Foundation. A lot of you know me as Loaf Pickle in the ecosystem. I've been a long-time Algorand community member between NFTs, helping out artists, building tools, making things open source. I'm sure you guys all know me. But I'm really excited to talk about Pera, what we're looking to do in the future, and our current roadmap, and all the exciting things that we have planned for Algorand.
Well, give us an overview into Pera, I guess, as we kick off. And I think one of the things you and I were kind of talking behind the scenes too, this conversation is probably going to open up pretty wide here. But, let me preface it this way. So, like, I think, we've seen a transformation in wallets. Crypto is historically like very obviously transactional. And that is certainly one thing that you do within a wallet. But I'm kind of interested in watching kind of this evolution into like this experience, like people's experience of these ecosystems really is within kind of the wallet itself. And tell us about Pera.
Yeah, so that's actually one thing we noticed ourselves is Pera, well, just crypto wallets in general have the ability to be sort of a one app for an entire blockchain. They're essentially the door a user takes into a blockchain experience. So for us with Pera, one of the main things and main focuses for us is to highlight all the dApps that are building on the chain, because that's what's going to keep users coming back. It's, how many times do you actually make a transaction in terms of buying and selling stocks unless you're a pro trader? Most of the time you just open up your trading app, you look at it, okay, cool, this is my balance at this day, and then you close it. There's no interaction. But with blockchain, you actually have that type of experience, but there's so much more to the other side of it. So for us, it's really important to not only make the wallet to have a great user experience for the end user, but at the same time allow them to kind of dive into blockchain and start exploring the ecosystem and promote anybody that is building on the Algorand network.
100%. I mean, I would love your take on like, what do you see kind of right now like as the most interaction within Pera? I know there's been some really big Algorand ecosystem milestones recently, like staking. And node validators and all the other stuff that comes along with that. But we also have like really diverse NFT communities and kind of everything else. I would love kind of your overview on that.
Yeah, so you mentioned staking. So if you're new to Algorand, a first-time user, in January, we changed the way that our reward systems work. And now if you participate in consensus, you are eligible for staking rewards. So every block that's proposed, the proposer gets a fee, and they also get an amount that's boosted by the Algorand Foundation for at least the next 2 years. So this has kind of changed the dynamic. So we found that since staking rewards went live, more people have been active in terms of the staking front. Before that, though, and it's still going on, the most user activity comes from the DeFi realm, whether it's Folks Finance, Tinyman, Vestige. Those are 3 of our top DeFi platforms. So swapping and trading is usually one of the top activities no matter what. And then we also have a prediction market that just launched on Algorand. It's called Alpha Arcade. And that has been recently the number 4 most popular DApp in the app. So as I was saying earlier, though, we have a Discover section and we actually rank the dApps. So the top 4 like most used dApps from yesterday will show up in its own sort of category. So we try to basically create a feedback loop that allows dApps to promote themselves. And then if they promote themselves well, they'll be like automatically promoted to more people. So we try to really install some gamification in order to make it easier for dApps to get recognized.
So you were saying before we started this, your journey into crypto, we were talking about how like 1 year in crypto is like 6 or 7 years in like mental in like a mental health state. What's interesting to me, and I'm curious if you've seen this, is like if I go back to 2017, 2018, and then again 2020, 2021, this year, and let's say like even last year, there have been so many announcements of real world like adoption in crypto that back in 2021, back in 2018 would have driven like a 6-month excitement narrative. And now it's like 3 or 4 times a day we're seeing it. Like, what are your thoughts just in general, like broadly, or maybe even within Algorand on like real world adoption of what we're seeing?
So it just feels like the next evolution. I came in during the 2020, 2021 hype. It was all about, NFTs, DeFi, the metaverse. And then I feel like, those kind of fizzled out over the next year or two. There was so many false promises. It kind of gets just being in crypto and that 7-year mental aging. It's just that kind of that negative cycle that you see. But what has made progress though over time is the real world assets. And I think what happened was that hype cycle died from, the NFTs and the metaverse and all that stuff that we kind of promoted in 2020, 2021. And the RWAs have been steadily building. I think, just seeing USDC and the adoption around it and seeing more products start to take fees in fiat currency, I just think that this is the more natural shift. And I think overall too, with RWAs, you can start having better business models around your DApp. I think what kind of led to a lot of things fizzling out in the previous hype cycle was a lot of these dApps did not have really good business models. And it just led to the whole thing collapsing after, more people kept buying in. And that was like, once people stop buying in, the whole thing collapsed. It's kind of like FTX in a way.
Yeah, 2021 was like when people were like, when people started using the word like more heavily as far as metaverse was concerned, and like we would just see like a really good trailer, like a movie trailer, and people were like, oh, this seems like a great idea, I'm just gonna like involve myself with this. And it's like after people stopped watching the trailer, it's like, oh, it's not really that. I think I do find like, and this is something that I find kind of interesting. I think from like the wallet provider standpoints, or and the explorer standpoint, I know that you guys have those aspects as well. You guys are probably in a really interesting position to kind of like see the entire ecosystem, where I think a lot of the times with like individual projects, it's like, they're focused on just building out their use case, or they're focused on, I think one of the pitfalls is like trying to maintain community across, because you'd be a really great dev, but it's like, oh, now I have to stand up a Twitter and a Telegram and a Discord and all this other stuff. What do you think like one of the main things that you see for like successful builders is throughout like the ecosystem?
Yeah. So like you touched on a lot of valid points there. So just to start things out, we are Pera Wallet, but we also have Pera Explorer. And it puts us in a very unique position in terms of other wallets, because we can essentially see the entire blockchain, and most wallets have to use a third-party service in order to get that type of information. So by having this, we're able to just measure the chain a lot more effectively and be able to monitor people's behavior in a way that, it would cost the company a lot of money because we already have it vertically integrated. But in terms of the, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was the question in terms of the dApps themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and you touched on this before, is like, people kind of, one of the kind of pitfalls in this space historically has been like momentum kind of dies out. And I think even like from the builder standpoint, we see that like, I think every, any legitimate builder goes into a project with like, I think this is going to be really successful, but I think we see like a lot of burnout sometimes. So I think the question I wanted to ask you is, what do you see from successful builders, like builders that have been here and continue doing it and have found a niche to like basically survive in this space to be able to grow?
Yeah. So the main pitfall I've seen people have is just general marketing. They don't have the ability to get their voice out that much. And a lot of people, especially Algorand, it's a very accessible blockchain. Like I started minting NFTs on mainnet just because it was so cheap. Like to me, it didn't matter. When I tried out Ethereum for the first time, it was like $100 to mint the first NFT. I had to think about it a little bit more. So I think with these cheaper L1 blockchains that are a lot more scalable, people kind of just dive in without a full plan. And then they kind of realize they got themselves into a mess a little bit. And then it's like, oh, wow, people spent hundreds and thousands of dollars on this art I minted. Now I actually have to do something in order to go. And I think it just gets overwhelming for people, like between managing the expectations, just kind of diving in head first without a business plan, without a marketing plan, without any sort of like business plan in general. And I think that's kind of like what led to a lot of the projects kind of downfall during the bear cycle is, people were just building what other people were building. There was no sort of, drive to really make it great. People kind of got in over their heads. And if you're a great dev and you made a great product, it doesn't mean that you're a great business person. It doesn't mean that you're a great marketer. So, you kind of need a village in order to make product work. And I just think too many people kind of went in solo without the proper skill sets and at least talent needed in order to make something successful. And that's where things kind of fell apart. But marketing is interesting because it's one of those things that we realized at Pera that we can really help boost projects. And that's the reason why we try so hard to make these dApps more discoverable, because the more good dApps we have and the more dApps that have users, the more survivability the network gets. And it starts creating that flywheel, because we need users. We need users using the dApps. We need users exploring the ecosystem. It makes dApps profitable, allows them to continue to build. It makes the ecosystem more welcoming for new dApps to come in because they see other dApps making money and they see other dApps being discovered. They see other dApps being promoted, and they realize too, especially on chains that are popular like Base or Solana, Ethereum, it's very hard to break through that noise. So by checking out a chain like Algorand, where the ecosystem is trying to help you set up for success, I think it makes a more welcoming invitation to potential builders and potential projects that are trying to make what their vision and their passion heard.
One thing that I think is interesting that that I think Algorand has done really well is kind of just meet everyday people where they're at. Like I still, I've been here since late 2016, and I still find it pretty funny that we see almost like communities competing against each other with things that I don't think are going to be that 95% of the people in the world don't even care about, nor will they ever care about or need to know. It's almost, getting into TPS and different things like that. It's it's almost like if we're all using the internet right now. And it's almost like if we're in 2025 and I'm like, hey, isn't it so amazing that I'm using Gmail and I can interoperate with you because you're on Yahoo Mail? And we're like, oh, this is fantastic. I think just the simplicity, one thing I always see kind of on Twitter when people do talk about the algo ecosystem is that it just works, which I think is really how much further down the rabbit hole do we have to go than something just works, either because it's it's fast or it's it's cost effective or whatever it is. I don't know, man. You and I were kind of talking about this behind the scenes a little bit too, where it's we get into these networks kind of inherently competing against each other instead of just let's just get the 90 to 95% of the people in the world that aren't here using the tech.
No, I feel you 100% on that. And I think, there are builders across certain chains, and I feel like we're more closer together than we are further apart, but we just get so stuck up on technical details. When you were mentioning the stats, and TPS was the first thing in my mind. So that's why I started laughing when you mentioned it. But if it's great, if we have the adoption, if we have everything, you want to have the best stats out there, but we're just not at that phase in crypto right now. And right now, in my opinion, where we should be working together is making the onboarding experience from a person who's never used crypto to making them a crypto user, but having it feel like they're safe, they're secure, and they're not lost in the process. So, I feel like this is the natural transition for this conversation, but I feel like we are doing that. We have the DeRec Alliance with, HBAR, Cardano, XRP, and I think another change just got recently added. But that's a way that we should be coming together in the community, is by finding these pain points that these people are having in terms of getting started with crypto and solving them. Because, I think from a blockchain level and from wallets in terms of interacting with dApps, there's been huge progress made over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. You could go on a website now Polymarket, and it doesn't really feel like a Web3 website anymore. It feels kind of like a Web 2.5. And we've done a good job, meeting customers in the middle in terms of that. But in terms of getting started with crypto, we have not at all. And, and at the end of the day too, crypto is extremely brutal. If you lose your keys, you lost all your money. So there just has to be better ways for people to come in and be able to get in there and start interacting with crypto, but not feel like if they make one mistake, their entire account is gone.
I know that, from the, I guess, just briefly on the DeRec stuff, which I do think is pretty fascinating. I think, I've had the opportunity to interview John Woods, probably a handful of times at this point, and then Lehman as well. And I know Algorand and the Hedera ecosystem, kind of the founding members within DeRec. I think Lehman from Hedera kind of looks at something like DeRec as like his seminal work, where really like which I think is fascinating, because if you go back like 2009 with Bitcoin to 2025, there really hasn't been a ton of innovation around key management. You know what I mean? Like, we still deal with the same problems in crypto, and there's a lot of kind of red tape there. I think it's fascinating. Like, I think when we talk about like what's going to get people, the masses, to kind of onboard, DeRec is certainly one of those things, especially when it's kind of technology agnostic and all the other stuff. And I guess from the Algorand standpoint, like, or at least the origins of something that is similar, and maybe you've had conversations with John Woods on this before too, but he's like Liquid Auth, what you guys are doing, as far as like, almost like an actual decentralized version of Wallet Connect. Yeah, I mean, but
yeah,
go ahead.
This is what we need. Right now, crypto is basically a scattered shot. It's like somebody took a shotgun and just fired, and then you have everything. But we need this sort of unity and the standardization across these different protocols that allow, so it doesn't really matter, like, if you pick Algorand, if you pick Hedera, but like, if a builder is looking to build on both, they have these similarities between them, and they could get started between them. And this is the type of interoperability that, I think that John Woods, the Algorand Foundation in general, and the founders of some of these other blockchains are actually looking at. And this is really where, I think, instead of fighting over stats like TPS or whatever, this is where the community should come together and figure out ways that their protocols and their dApps can start working together with other chains and figure out these sort of patterns. So that way, a user doesn't have to come onto Algorand to discover your app. A user from Hedera can discover an app for Algorand, or a user from Algorand can discover an app for Hedera. And this is the way that we kind of should be looking at it, as a multitude or a constellation of all these dApps and products, because we're all here to help, evangelize the adoption of crypto and Web3. So, and by fighting with each other, it's not helping that cause.
One thing I saw that, I'm glad I scrolled through this, because I didn't have it in my notes here, but going fully open source, I think that's pretty cool. We don't, I'm sure that there are some wallets out there in crypto that have done that, but I don't see that a lot. I guess, can you touch base on kind of the thought process on what that opens up for people to contribute, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, so I was called threefold. So the first one is, it's out there. Anybody that has any issues with like the way that we handle anything, you could check it out yourself. I know this doesn't apply to people who don't code, but there's that assurance that if you wanted to, you could have it checked. So I think that helps the users feel a little bit more comfortable. Second, community contributions. We actually have a couple in the pipeline right now. It's fantastic. A lot of people are looking to add some features in there, but our team's very busy. We're currently working on implementing one key wallets, which allows you to derive multiple wallet addresses using one key phrase, which is really good in terms of like the user onboarding. So you don't have to memorize like 25 different key phrases for 25 different wallets anymore. So that should be ready probably like mid-April. But apart from that, we have so much on the roadmap, like adding charts. We have this, we're going to be improving our swap. And we have just a whole host of just UI upgrades that we have planned. So this allows people to get their upgrades in a lot faster. And from an integration standpoint, like if a third-party service wanted to integrate their DApp within Pera and we don't have the capacity, we can actually give them the option to code it in themselves. So it actually makes our partnerships a lot easier as well. And then just the ethos of Web3. I think it's open source. More crypto wallets should be open source. More products should be open source. I think that in order for us to have the type of scale and explosion of Web 2, we need to have some of these core components of Web 3 open source, so that way people can take them, improve them, and then we can keep blowing things up, similar to like the way that like Linux started. It was an open source repo, and now it's became the monster that it is today. So it's the ethos. We have to be open source.
How do you, from like, because I look at, I look at something like Pera as like infrastructure within a whole network. How do you stay on top of like innovation, like without kind of, it's what I found it's very hard in crypto sometimes to kind of get outside of the echo chamber to see what else is kind of being built to make sure that that even from Pera's standpoint, you guys can like continue innovating and it's like, oh, that's cool that what they're doing over there. Maybe we could fit that in something over here, or maybe use, unique characteristics of Algorand to do something even different over here,
Yeah, it's tricky because you want to be feature rich. You want to be able to keep up with what other wallets are doing and stay compatible on that level. But at the same time, you also want to innovate. But sometimes that feels like kind of throwing a dart in the dark. Like you don't exactly know what is going to work. But so something that we do internally is number one, we encourage like all our staff to use the app as much as possible. I think that's very important, especially from like a user experience standpoint. So we can understand the pain points before anybody else does. Like, being power users of your own product really helps your quality of the app itself. So we try doing that. We look at more Web 2 apps as well. Like we look at apps like Robinhood, Charles Schwab, that trading apps, see things that they have that, more of a TradeFi crowd is into, because we feel like TradeFi to DeFi is probably the most natural transition. So being able to figure things out that way and not just taking inspiration from other crypto wallets, look at the Web 2 world, see what's working there, find out things that work from an engagement standpoint, haptic feedback, variable rewards, just confetti, very simple animations in general. Like there are so many ways that we can not only improve based on like existing information, but then like you said, we have Algorand itself. So we're going to be launching a new feature relatively soon. It's basically a Mastercard, and you can take your USDC from on-chain, load up the Mastercard, and be able to spend it anywhere Mastercard is accepted. It's an amazing off-ramp for crypto. We're still working on the on-ramp side of things, but this basically solves the off-ramp side of things. Yeah. So it's a really cool feature. But with Algorand, we have instant finality on the chain. So with other card apps, like you actually don't have control of your money. You have to like send it over to another, like for example, the way that like the one on MetaMask works, you have to send it to another chain called Linea. And then from there, the Linea automatically like takes the funds out. But on Algorand, you send it to a smart contract. You can withdraw it at any time. It's instant transfers because of the instant finality. And what's nice too is when you swipe the card, it gets just withdrawn from the smart contract. There's no like settlement time. So for the merchant, it's instant, which I think is the future of payments. Is having to wait like the 24 to 48 hours for a credit card in order to get the money is one of those areas where I think if more business owners were able to understand how blockchain can benefit their profit margins, I think would be one of those areas too that we can start reaching in. So that's the other way we look at things, is like where in the Web 2 world, or where in the actual world are there areas that we can help reduce down the margin of what people are paying. And I think credit cards are probably one of those like easiest first time payments. So it's like, how do we create a payment system on Algorand that basically allows businesses to automatically accept USDC? And now they're not losing 2 to 3% of every sale to the credit card fees. They could get 100% of that. And after a whole year, that really adds up for the merchant. And it's like one of those ways that we just have to, create these products that solve these use cases, and then from there be able to take it to the next level and bring it out to the public. And that's just the way I think crypto gets adopted. You make it useful, people realize it's useful, and they start using it. And I think that's kind of the thing that was missing too, is we didn't really have a lot of those useful things. It was more of just kind of like trading up and down in order to hope to catch the volatility and make a lot of money fast. But now we're seeing like with the RWAs, it can start becoming useful for the end user. So I feel like we're starting to make that transformation into that next phase and evolution of crypto itself.
That was one of I've thought about this in the past a little bit, and maybe just kind of I'll go down not too deep down a rabbit hole here, but a little bit. You bring up a couple of interesting points, like in crypto and in blockchain, we always kind of hear this verbiage like, democratization of finance, level playing field, all this stuff. And I think that that's great that we use that verbiage. But I think once you've been in crypto long enough, you start to realize that not everybody's doing that. And it's almost like we're not only like reinventing some of the problems, or maybe like rebranding some of the problems that already exist in Web 2, but also like weaponizing them with technology. So like it absolutely has to be about like making everyday people's lives like better. And yeah. I think, the quicker that we can get to that, you mentioned like atomic settlements and things like that like, and even at the beginning when you're mentioning Yeah, I wanted to buy an NFT on Ethereum, but it was like $120 a gas fee. So nobody's like $120 legitimately. Like if we're talking about mass adoption of crypto in some countries, like that is like enough money to feed your entire family for like a month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like we have to get to a point of actually like empowering people and making use of the tech in a way that makes sense for everybody.
Well, I mean, since you just mentioned about the hungry people, like one of the programs that does run on Algorand Rails is this program called Hezbollah, and essentially what it does is it sends gift cards to people in Afghanistan and allows them to pay their bills with it. But the blockchain's used from a traceability perspective. So like supply chains is another huge area where you could use blockchain for traceability. The other thing that I see, this is my personal belief, but I think AI and the control of information is going to be another area where blockchain starts taking over, because it's becoming so good to make images, make videos, make text, make voice recordings, that we're going to get to a point in the future where nobody knows what's real anymore.
Yep.
So at least if I have an address and I could publish a message from that address, people know that that came from me. So I think authentication is, like you said earlier, it's a boring use case of blockchain. It's not sexy, but it's one of the most useful things. And another thing, and I think Liquid Auth is going to play into this a lot, is just signing into a website. Like it's one of those things that we kind of take for granted, but it sucks. Like if I connect my Google account, the website has all my information, right? They're sending me emails to my email account, or I got to make a spam email account, and that one's just like full of spam information. Then I got worried about my password getting hacked, and they could have access to all those sites. With crypto, like we kind of underestimate how simple and anonymous logging into a DApp is. It's just my wallet ID. Like they don't get anything else besides from my wallet ID and the balances in my wallet. So from a website standpoint, I think logins using crypto technology is extremely undervalued. And I think too, if people start using like assets as tokens, like you can't really breach a website anymore unless they have access to that specific wallet that allows for the token to display the proper information. So I think it could be also used to help enhance security for the end users. So, I mean, these are just a few of the areas that we're kind of seeing that adoption might come in through these funnels. So then from a wallet standpoint, it's about understanding like where these potential funnels are and like how can we potentially catch these users. So it's a whole strategy. It involves like, keeping up with today, but also like kind of looking out where are things going to be in a year from now, 2 years from now, and then trying to make some accommodations and be just have a good user experience for if one of those things actually succeeds.
Yeah, I think with like the AI stuff and you get into like provenance of data, like, or I guess a better way of saying it's just like the origin of data. And let me try to figure out how I want to go down this path here, because there's so many different things that tie in. I think it's not only like a good use case to like, authenticate things obviously on blockchain, especially as like AI becomes much more prevalent, and it's already very prevalent. But like, think about like the world that we live in. Like we were in such an attention driven economy, and it's very hard, like you mentioned, to see like what's real, what's fake. I think during the interview I did with John and Lehman, even, Lehman was saying like, there's no way of getting around it with where AI is going. We're just going to have to digitally sign things. I mean, things are just going to need to be digitally signed. Where would they, where would those records be? Obviously, probably makes sense for blockchain. One thing I think is interesting, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, because I mentioned earlier, like I think we're seeing we've seen this evolution of like wallets from just being purely transactional to like more experience driven. I don't think that slows down at all. Like one of the use cases in crypto that we've seen try to get across the line a handful of times is like replacing traditional social media with like a crypto app, and it's just never taken off. And I think a lot of the reasons is because it's tricky. Anytime you introduce a token for a social app, and like people start caring more about the token than the social app itself. But what I think might end up happening is within, wallets, Pera, for example, like over time, and I'm saying like, long term, you could have some real interesting social functionality, because people are like, I fervently believe that like as digital identity and stuff like starts really come to fruition with global standards and everything, all this stuff is going to kind of merge together.
Yeah.
And then I've got to figure like, okay, where is it going to live? Like, where my experience is going to necessarily live? How am I going to interact? And I think like wallets across these networks are kind of the perfect platform for that eventually.
No, I agree. I think that we're like kind of on the precipice of, a world that there's really no looking back from. And it's kind of crazy. I mean, just looking at what the new ChatGPT can do with the images. I mean, it's amazing.
Everybody's Studio Ghibli now.
Yeah, and it's but like I feel it from the content creator side of things, because what's a business going to do now? They're just going to use a few prompts, and it's going to put graphic designers out of business. But I think there is an argument to be made for the content that it is trained on, and I do think this is another case for blockchain in the future, because when we publish on these platforms like X, Facebook, whatever, like you're basically giving your work over to that platform, and you don't actually own the content. With Web3, you do own the content. So I think, with more of this AI, and it's constantly grabbing, like, I was reading a book. It was called Rewrite Own. It's by the guy who runs A16Z.
Okay.
But essentially in the book, he was talking about, Google potentially implementing an AI, and it basically skims all the websites. And instead of people going on the website where they would get monetization from the ads and the page views, they just use the Google AI now, and they don't actually click the websites. Fast forward 2 years after the book was written, and that's exactly what's happening. So now we're seeing more like news websites, for example, go up behind paywalls, which for the end user is just more subscriptions. And then you have to have a subscription for ChatGPT. So it's another subscription on top of a subscription. So we're just getting subscription to death. So at least with blockchain, it allows people to sort of be able to not only own their content, but distribute it in other different mediums. And I'm hoping that more people will start seeing the use cases to using blockchain just from the simple ownership perspective. And you don't have to worry about all your content being taken from these platforms or from these AI machines that are learning from whatever you're posting.
Do you think, we mentioned RWAs at the beginning of this, and like, we do have some aggregators out there, and I know that certain aggregators do not have every network at this point in time too. So like a lot of these numbers are even skewed. I'm not even sure if RWA XYZ has Algorand yet. I know that I've heard rumblings that obviously it's coming, and it should be on there. I don't think Hedera's on RWA XYZ either yet. But I just kind of want to put this into context that, like, if you look at real world assets on chain, excluding stable coins, RWA XYZ is saying 19 billion, 19.6 billion. Go back to like 2021 at this same time frame. And you're sitting at like, 300 million, and now we're at 19 billion. This certainly isn't slowing down. But I want to put this in the context of, like, people always kind of think of like the low hanging fruit for real world assets. And I actually think that, like, my data, the way that I interact right now across Twitter and different things, has value to it. And like that, I think, is going to be really interesting, like, to watch if, like, we're living, number one, we're already living in this attention economy. And once everything starts, all these different layers of technology kind of converge together, do I get monetized just for my normal interactions on a daily basis? And like, where does that live? You know what I mean? Like, is that a real world asset? Is my data a real world asset on chain?
I mean, it should be. But that's why these platforms are free, because that's what you're paying, is your data. And
I'm the product on Twitter for sure.
Exactly. But it is interesting though, because like, I've been talking to a company, and instead of like cookies on a website, it's an AI agent, and the AI agent learned you. So like, these websites after a while are going to know you better than you know yourself, which to me is another thing that's completely, wild and mind blowing, but it's just kind of just this next evolution of how things are going.
What is, so I know there've been a couple of bigger milestones. Last year, I guess I'll give a tiny bit of backstory. Like, I think the first interview I did within like the Algorand ecosystem, I'm gonna forget it. I'm probably not accurate here. I think it might have been around DeRec with John and Lehman, but then like after that, there was a summit. So this is like right when AlgoKit 2.0 went live, which was, for those that aren't aware, that's native Python within the ecosystem. And I guess for those that aren't aware, in addition to that, like, and I only learned this after going to this conference, But Python is kind of like from what I've looked at, I'm not a developer, a little bit of an easier language to kind of develop in. It's a little bit more compartmentalized than some of the other coding languages out there. I guess you could get into like, financial services, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence. So anyways, long story short, like I went to the PyCon summit because it was like 5 minutes from my house, and there was like Bloomberg and a bunch of other companies there. And there was only like, I actually was like, my eyes kind of open. I was like, there's only one blockchain here. And it was Algorand was the only blockchain there.
Yeah.
And when you pair that on top of AlgoKit 3.0 with TypeScript, like it seems like you guys are really trying to make it, from the Algorand standpoint, as easy to build as possible. How do you think that this stuff's going to impact the wallet, being that the wallet's open source? Can people contribute in different code languages? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so it's going to be tough to actually code because our Android app is in Kotlin is the computer language, and then it's I think Swift on iOS. So it's not fully compatible, but personally, I think the TypeScript is going to have more of an impact than the Python. The only reason why I say that is Python is basically a backend language. Like it's great for smart contracts, things like that. But with TypeScript, a person can not only make the contract, but they can also make the entire website. So I think it's going to have way more of an impact over the Python. So I'm hoping that more people more full stack developers see this, make a contract, make a full website. And for Pera, it'll be great because in our Discover section, we can start highlighting those products, and more transactions on chain just benefits the entire network. So having, better dApps, better smart contracts, just a better developer ecosystem in general, because not only did they release 3.0, but they completely redid all the developer documentation as well, which was a little bit outdated. They were doing a good job keeping up with it, but this new portal is just so much better. So we're hoping to, kind of abstract away a lot of the difficulty we've seen from new developers getting started. Because it's not only like, they could use TypeScript, but you still have to learn blockchain, and that's the tough part. And so we're really trying to, we realized that was a key friction point. So they did a really great job improving all the developer documentation in order to make that a lot smoother of an experience. So we'll see, it's kind of like one of those things where, it's not going to have that immediate payoff. It's just basically like planting a giant seed and just waiting for that tree to grow. So it's going to be interesting to see. It came out Wednesday. So we're hoping to see a lot of new users hopefully download it and start using it.
You brought this up, and I'm curious your thoughts, just like maybe expand a bit on it. But I think it's really interesting kind of what we're witnessing right now. And I think it's like almost like dominoes kind of falling as far as like traditional finance coming into DeFi. Yeah. It obviously ties in with, directly in with tokenization of RWAs and all the other stuff that comes along with that. But it also ties in with like payments and settlements. And I mean, we've seen a couple of states in the United States say that they're going to go live with a stablecoin. I saw a funny tweet from a developer on a different network that's like, do we think that it's a good idea that individual states are issuing stablecoins? And I responded with, I actually want to get down to like the library level inside of municipalities, like libraries should be issuing like it's crazy what we're seeing right now. But what do you think? I mean, this is maybe more of like from the Algorand Foundation standpoint, because you probably are in the weeds with what's really going on. Like, it seems to me like stablecoin legislation is kind of first on the docket. But it really opens up the door for like, I don't think most people even realize how much adoption is kind of like literally knocking at the door right now for this space.
Yeah, because I mean, I guess this is a little bit of a divergent topic, but like one of the things that I see is, a lot of the people that are extremely wealthy, they have these items that they have high value and low liquidity. For example, like a Fabergé egg, right? The market for them really isn't everybody. But if I was rich, I would say like, hey, here's my Fabergé egg. I'm going to tokenize it, break it into 1,000 parts and sell those pieces. So now I don't own 100% of the Fabergé egg, but I own this. But people can pay for that. And now he has all this expanded liquidity, or they have all this expanded liquidity to spend on other things. So I think like it's the stable coins from each town and each government, I think will help in terms of making people feel more comfortable with tokenizing things on the chain. I don't know how much of an effect it will have, but it will be nice to see my municipality's balances right on blockchain by them posting a public address, and I understand where their balance sheet's at. I think that from a public transparency standpoint is the way that we should be moving as a country. But I think the real we have so much liquidity that's locked into these like high priced art assets that if that market ever got tokenized on chain, I think we'll see an explosion of wealth that we've really haven't seen in a while. And the other thing is, it's kind of what got me into Algorand was there was an interview on Lex Friedman back in like 2020, and they talked about the tokenization of real estate buildings and like going into Manhattan. There's only I used to work in high-rise buildings before I came into blockchain. I used to do like fire alarms and stuff. And I would notice that every single building in the city was basically owned by like 1 of 5 companies. And just nobody has the money to buy real estate. But if you were to tokenize like a skyscraper, then you can have, all these groups start growing in it from a public level. So, and, from the people who are selling, that's so much more liquidity that they have because they don't have to lose possession of the property in order to actually get the liquidity for it. So I really see that as kind of what's going to bring a lot of money on chain in general, is just the tokenization of these low liquidity, high value assets.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Even with like tokenization of real estate, you can get into the weeds with like where things are going from like an ESG standpoint. Like, this kind of green economy stuff that's leading us out towards 2030 and 2050. There needs to be verification of like even building materials and things like that. I think a lot of the times when people talk about digital identity, red flags go up and they're like, oh, you're not going to track me, buddy. But it's like not just us as individuals. And it's a rightful claim to kind of be semi-concerned on how this technology shakes out. I get it. Yeah. But it's identity of things. It's identity of real world. That's the whole idea of tokenization of a real world asset. Like, unless you can properly identify something, there's no point in tokenizing it and bringing it on chain.
Yeah.
But I think, real estate's an interesting industry, like 300 to 370 trillion, depending on where you're getting your stats from, like globally of a market. When you bring up like fractional ownership and kind of like liquefying traditionally non-liquid assets, what I find super interesting about this space, and we've seen this, is that there's like use cases in crypto that almost seem like they were too early for their time, but then we almost see a resurgence of it 4 or 5 years later. Micropayments is a perfect example of that. Like, there were micropayment platforms in crypto, I can think 2015, 2016, some that stand out. And now we're seeing a resurgence of micropayments coming out, like of real world use cases with like entities. We're going to see the same thing with like luxury goods and everything else. There were platforms a few years ago that were like trying to tokenize luxury goods, whatever they may be. And it's like, okay, that's great. You can do it. But I think when like the compliance stuff comes into place and everything shakes out, I think the conversation is going to shift from you can do it, but why would you, to why wouldn't you do it? Yeah, because it just streamlines everything.
Just makes so much more sense. And yeah, it's really that learning curve that we kind of have to get past, and allowing people to understand, like, why wouldn't you do this? Like, if you're an artist, why wouldn't you make your art as NFTs? You'll own it and you could sell it, and it's like you don't have to worry about that stuff. So it's really like we have to do a better job in crypto in terms of messaging to people's self-interest and getting them to understand that, there are benefits to using this type of technology, and, here is why. And I think the more we are able to openly discuss it and kind of have these products, like you said, these products that we could showcase as it's real. It's not just like the fluff that you heard in the past, and, kind of show them. Like, for example, we have a real estate, tokenization company called Lofty, and they do that. And they have, I don't know the number. I'm not going to guess it, but anyway, we can point to that. We can point to the aid in the Middle East as another real world example. We have companies that are using blockchain for traceability purposes. We have World Chess, that basically every single game is written to the blockchain to show that the game is authentic. So like, there are these now we have these experiences. And you were mentioning micropayments. Isn't that how Doge got started back in like 2015? There was like micropayments on Reddit or something.
Yeah, I remember micropayments through like Ripple and XRPL. What was that? I want to say it was called Coil. I think it was Coil. And I don't even know if the platform's there anymore, but it was almost like a kind of like a quasi Patreon app. But what I find really interesting is like now we're seeing like actual like government entities and things like that are like, hey, this could legit change the way that like we run infrastructure in this country. And I had the opportunity. opportunity to interview, I think, Jerry from Lofty like a few months ago, which I think they're taking an interesting stance on it too, almost being like a marketplace, right?
Yeah.
And not necessarily being like, we're going to go out of the weeds and tokenize this one thing. It's like, hey, anybody can list, properties on here, and it fragment, it opens up access for fractional ownership and all the other stuff that you were talking about, which I find is kind of fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that's the way. Like Web3 should be open. Like if I want to do this thing, as long as I have the legal compliance behind it and make sure that you do own part of my house if I decide to tokenize it, like I should be able to do it. And I think their approach is really smart because they're not the ones that are controlling it. They're letting you control it. So, it's just way more scalable in that sense. And if more people want to tokenize their house, whether instead of getting a reverse mortgage, because interest rates are insane right now, like they have the ability to do that. So I do think these use cases are there. It's just a matter of getting the word out better. And, to your point earlier, like a little bit of an internal joke we like to say about Algorand is that like, it's so far ahead that it's behind because, we've had all these features since like its inception for the most part. And, all these things that, some other blockchains are adding or, TPS that we've had for a very long time, people are finally getting to. Like it creates hype events if it's new, but like it's there when it's there already, it's hard to really celebrate those facts sometimes because everybody cares about like the new and shiny. So having these products or these micropayment systems that, cater to the specialty of the blockchain themselves, I think will really start making like a lot of the scene a lot better. So it kind of creates that resurgence that you were talking about.
There was like the phraseology going around, like, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, that younger guy tweeted, and I don't even know his name. I don't think I follow him, but talking about like Dino networks and Dino coins. And it was such like a ridiculous statement, but if you put it into context, like for networks that have been around for a while, like if you've been in this space doing any sort of actual research into the space, you start realizing pretty quickly that the networks that have been here, are the ones that have developed trust with real world enterprises and institutions. They are the ones that have laid the foundations from like the technology standpoint to make things just work. Like I mentioned earlier, what I hear or what I see all the time on Twitter, and this isn't purely talking about like the network itself, is that like the Algorand network just works. And that's like, that doesn't come from like a flash in the pan thing that is like built over like a, let's start an online casino and have a platform go through the roof and have, memes launch every second. And that's great that you can do that, but let's build a whole network on the back end of just memes. And it's like, you see what happens with that, because at some point the merry-go-round stops.
Yeah.
And then like what's kind of left is just like a bunch of nonsense. And then we basically like hit the reset button for another cycle and wait 4 years. Like,
yeah.
What's being built like from the real world adoption standpoint, I think is like super freaking important, because that's going to get us to where we want to go with this whole space in general, is like, look, for the masses, right?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. So before I got into Pera 2, I was into NFTs, and it was the same thing as the start of an NFT hype cycle. You would have this project launch, everyone would buy in, think it was going to be the next big thing. And, it goes up in price, and over time it's a slow bleed to zero, and then they rug. And then next thing you know, the same thing happens with another NFT launch, but it's the same cycle, just over a longer period of time. And we saw that too, like before meme coins, we had like that L2 super cycle where it seemed like there was a new L2 being launched from Ethereum every week. And it was just a Band-Aid on top of a Band-Aid. Like it didn't really do anything, but like it was the next big thing. It would go up in price, and then it would be a slow bleed, and then everybody forget about it. And then there'd be a new L2 a month later. I mean, luckily that whole process had sped up, in my opinion, to the meme coin super cycle, where it's basically the same thing. It's like a super coin pump and then a slow bleed, and then you have a million other coins that follow it. So I think we just kind of get away from that super cycle of just like these like false promises pumps, and kind of look back to these, I don't want to use the term, but these Dino coins that have been chugging away, have been building on the network. I mean, you look at like what Hedera has been doing, look at what Cardano's been doing, look at what XRP has been doing. Like these chains have been building over the last 4 or 5 years, or since their inception. So like, why is it a bad thing that they're around for a long time? Like if you look at a restaurant, do you trust the restaurant that opened up 5 days ago, or you trust the restaurant you've been going to for 20 years?
Yeah.
We have such like the way we view things in the normal world and the way we view things in the crypto world, for some reason, happen to get very crossed sometimes. Like like even too, if I'm a business owner, like if I'm running an NFT project, like, you know, any business, your goal is to make money, but it seems like in crypto, your goal is to give all your money away. So it's like sometimes things become very twisted. So I think, you know, over time, especially with these more mature networks, we kind of understand like what's noise and what isn't noise. So we focus on the important things, but you know, sometimes it's tough because the noise can be very loud and it gets frustrating.
100%. I know. I remember looking at well, there was like a 4 or 5 day period of time last year where like that squirrel was trending. You know, the squirrel. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I certainly feel for the squirrel and everything else, but like, then you know, you see like a meme coin launch and all this other stuff. Like, one thing for me that I think needs to happen in this space, and again, this kind of comes into, and we'll ramp down here in a second. I don't even know what time it is. You know, we talk about like this level playing field and stuff. But like even internally into the industry, like I won't get too down into the weeds with this, but like I know like exchange listings are like a big, you know, they're a critical factor for like adoption, right? But and it's like who's setting the benchmark for like quality assurance for like what's actually getting listed versus not. And if we're just posting or if we're just listing, you know, some new shit coin that got launched, you know, yesterday because the Studio Ghibli is trending. It's like, what are we actually trying to accomplish here in this space? But we don't have to go too far down the rabbit hole. I just hope that over time, and I think that,
it's tough. I do understand what you're saying, but at the same time, I think part of the beauty of Web3 is the permissionless nature of it. So like, you know, it kind of goes at odds. Like to me, I see all these like crap coins being listed on Coinbase. I'm never going to buy anything. Like I just know enough of the space, but like a new user might buy them, get rugged, and that's the end of their crypto experience. So it could, so it's like, where is that line? I do understand Coinbase makes their money off of trading fees. They want to have the coins that are trading. Like it makes sense from a business perspective. So I can't hate the player because then I'd hate the game. And it is what it is at that point. But I do understand your point. Like at Pera, we have this thing called ASA verification. Because we found early on that, like, for example, USDC, it has its own unique ASA ID, but unless you know that ASA ID, you know, 1 million USDC coins can be made. So we had to basically create a check mark to confirm that, like, this is the USDC that is owned by Circle. But, you know, then it's like, do you protect users from rugs and stuff? That's very impossible. Like, there have been very, like, long-term creators that have rugged like 3-4 years after the fact. And are we going to be responsible for any of that stuff? No. So the only point of this verification is essentially to say that this is owned by this person. And and that's kind of the line that we had to draw with it. So even if it's like a crappy coin that you know is going to rug, as long as they can confirm the ownership, that's all this check means. Because if we start assigning more meaning to it than that, then it just opens us up to a giant liability. So it's very tricky sometimes in Web3 to find that proper balance between, like, you know, protecting your users, but then also being open to everybody.
Well, let's end this on a positive note, dude. No, and you know, it is great that you guys are taking steps to, you know, make sure that you can kind of, you know, focus on at least whatever level you guys can, for kind of identifying, you know, these different things. But you know, what are you excited about for the future? I know that you mentioned that there's some pretty exciting stuff coming up for Pera. I don't know how far down the rabbit hole you want to get with that, or just the, you know, the Algorand network in general, the wider crypto space. Kind of the floor is yours here. Forward-looking statements. Yeah,
so I'm extremely looking forward to this next level of Pera. I mean, we had a lot of technical debt when I joined. We've been working hard to clean that all up, but this year, the app that you're looking at is going to be a completely different app, between the code base being a lot snappier and it responding better to just general overall beautification of the app. I mean, we got features coming soon. We have a more button, which allows us to highlight features a lot better. It's going to be sick. We have charts coming, which is going to be sick too. We have Pera Explorer, which over the last couple of months, we've made into a powerhouse. We got more stuff coming that way. We're trying to, essentially with Pera Explorer, we're trying to make it like as the live view of Pera. So on the homepage, you can see all the stats in real time. You can see the top tokens that are moving. You can see the top NFT collections are moving. We have other ideas to keep this live. So if you're just looking to see what's happening on Algorand, all you have to do is just go to one page. And in addition to that, we're hoping to get multi-sig wallets in this year. We're hoping to improve our swap itself. We know there's a lot of community requests, so we're currently designing a nice feature with that. And we got a ton of other surprises that, I'm just going to keep secret because I don't want to spoil everything for everybody. But just stay tuned. This is a really big year for us. We've done already so far in this first quarter, and I'm really excited for Q2 to start seeing a lot of the results of that effort.
Is there, so I know you mentioned DeRec earlier. Is there like any implementation of like V1 of DeRec, or do you think that stuff's going to go live, or do you think that that's yeah?
So right now, our out of the two, our focus right now is Liquid Auth, because we have a lot of, the wallet connection is we see as a bigger user hindrance right now. So right now our focus is on the Liquid Auth and getting that implemented. DeRec, we don't know where we still have to do a full analyzation of what it looks like to incorporate those features. So we haven't made a determination of whether or not we're going to do that this year yet. But I mean, if it's a small scope of work, maybe. But right now, we just have a very packed roadmap for 2025. So hopefully we could get to it. But if not, probably it'll be next year.
Okay. I definitely wanted to mention, check out genfinity.io. We just did a deep dive into Pera. We did an overview of AlgoKit 3.0 and native TypeScript. I'm pretty sure back in the day we did one on AlgoKit 2.0 on Python as well, which is pretty fascinating. If you want to check out Pera, and I recommend that you at least go and browse through what the app features are, go to parawallet.app. Huge shout out to the Algorand Foundation for helping us to put these spaces together at ALGO Foundation. You can give Pera a follow on X as well at Pera Algo Wallet. Joseph, hang out with me here for a second as I ramp this down. And I should mention, I know that you and I have kind of been talking a little bit. I'd love to bring you on for like a cross-chain, UX/UI focus, like user experience space, maybe in April at some point, and kind of go from there too.
Awesome.
All right, hang out with me for 1 sec. I'll ramp this down and make sure I get the recording and go from there.
Awesome.
All right, we're good on Twitter.